Chapter 2. Welcome to your new home. Daniel had called that out with joy when he'd stepped out of the rickety van the morning before. He'd taken a moment to breathe it in. A new house, a fresh start. He then walked to the passenger side and unloaded the brown cardboard box that was sat on Laythe's lap. Thank you, Daniel. I still can't quite believe you did it. Laythe was the only person who'd called Dan by his full name. It made him feel professional, mature. Daniel was now how he introduced himself to everyone. Stepping out of the van, Laythe studied the house, a quiet-looking, two-story brick townhouse with a big blue door and an old-fashioned dusty bell hanging by its side. In front of the building, a thick bush of lavender filled Daniel's nostrils with a calming scent as they approached the door. Daniel saw that the long, sloping driveway held the parked van with its nose pointing down, as if the beast was bowing before the gates of heaven. He was proud of himself for pulling this whole thing together at such short notice. "Does the bell work?" Laythe asked. "No idea, but it looks older than me. I'm guessing no." "Well, fuck that. We have to find another house." Daniel glanced over to check he was joking, and they both smiled. He took out the keys and unlocked the door. Laythe had always commanded a unique sense of humor, which Daniel often told him should be put to use in stand-up comedy, along with everyone else who laughed at Laythe's quips. Most of the jokes themselves went over Daniel's head. They'd only be got after a long while staring blankly, while Laythe would stare back, smirking as he watched the gears turn. "You know, we should totally have a big hug right now and make the neighbors think a gay couple just moved in." Laythe laughed and looked back at the other houses on the street. Daniel chuckled and turned to face the street. He'd scoped out the neighborhood during the open house viewing just 3 days before. "So we've got a couple of Pakistani families to our right, a few local northerners to our left, and right across the street is someone whose bumper sticker is "God hates fags." Please, can we pretend we're gay? It would add such fun and drama to the neighborhood. Imagine the gossip and sour looks we'd get. Daniel always found it strange when Laythe enjoyed putting people in uncomfortable situations. A few years before, Laythe had riled up a Turkish barber who had enshrined his shops with Quranic verses and symbols. Laythe asked for a cutthroat shave, let the barber wash and massage his face, then loudly called out to Daniel in the waiting room, "Make sure you get that guy's number. He's really cute. I'd love to take him out." He lay back and proceeded to let the man hold a razor blade to his neck. "I thought it'd be funny," he later explained. "The guy is clearly a bigot, so why not turn that bigotry against him? Mr. Devout Muslim, I am gay. Now shave my face." Daniel had struggled not to laugh as he watched the uncomfortable barber shave the face of an enemy of God. But it wasn't over. Every few minutes, Laythe threw in an over-the-top camp mannerism just to make sure the knife-wielding paragon of self-restraint hadn't forgotten. Laythe was not gay, and in fact was quite the womanizer. He had once had a very long relationship with a girl who had utterly betrayed him, so was now enjoying the single life as much as he could. His natural charm drew women into orbit, where he could enjoy them as his whims directed before jettisoning them off into the void, awaiting another. Daniel was 5 years younger than Laythe, and still deep in the early 20s sex fest mindset. He had no intentions of finding a wife or, God forbid, having a child. His relationships wouldn't last more than a few dates, partly because he was obsessed with his escape the 9-to-5 business. All non-essential aspects of life were ignored. Relationships beyond sex just didn't seem worth it. But, truth be told, he had lost his mojo. The confidence he'd felt talking to girls in his younger years had faded behind self-doubt, insecurity, and oftentimes plain boredom. Business was what drove him now. Success. Riches and fame and glory and power. He knew he was capable of achieving great things. He just had to figure out how to do it. So far, he hadn't figured that out. But that was why he was here, outside this comfortable-looking house in a suburb of York, the beating heart of Yorkshire, surrounded on all sides by natural parks, areas of outstanding natural beauty, and yes, lots and lots of university student girls to chase. The house was unfurnished, an unavoidable reality for the budget Daniel had put together, but had a lot of floor space that Daniel quickly covered with rugs he had collected from the various countries he had visited. He was going to use this opportunity to its full, finally get some peace to reflect on the last few years. "Where should we put the ginger throne?" Daniel said as he carried his bright orange reclining leather seat in from the van. "Well, the Chesterfields are going in the living room, the white sofa in the conservatory, so maybe in your room?" Laythe suggested. "Not really enough space in my room. Plus, I love this chair. I want it somewhere I can just chill and read, I think the conservatory." The chair had been bought for him as a child when his family moved to the Middle East. It had a lot of memories tied up in its seams. "Do you really think it'll go well in there? What with the color?" Daniel looked at the bright orange leather and thought to himself, "I don't care if Laythe doesn't like the color. It's my favorite chair. I'm going to put it where I want." "Look, Laythe, we can get all interior designy once you have a job and can start buying things for the house together, but for now, let's just go with the practicalities. It's a good reading chair, conservatory's good for reading. Let's put it there." "You're the boss. Whatever you want, Daniel." Laythe brought his hand into a mock salute. Daniel felt a wave of memories flood into his mind. Moments in their friendship where Laythe's sarcastic remarks had struck a nerve. Moments he had forgotten about during their year-long separation. Like when Daniel had asked Laythe to help him write a business plan. It wasn't a productive meeting. Daniel told Laythe he wasn't happy with the work they'd done and that they should call it a day. Laythe sneered. "Thank you so much for giving up your day to help me. You're such a good friend, Dan." Incidents like that had happened a few times. Daniel would be left feeling like shit after being spoken to with sarcasm and backhanded remarks. Each time it happened, he told himself that friends shouldn't speak to each other like that. But a few jokes and an evening of playing Xbox later, he'd forget all about it. Forget until the next time it happened, when in addition to feeling shit for whatever comment was said, he'd also feel shit for having blotted out Laythe's passive-aggressive dark side yet again. He needed a breather. "I'm going to head to the charity shop down the road and see if I can find anything useful." "You know, it's fine, the house being like this, unfurnished and all. You did a great job finding this house, matey. Even if there's mold on the walls. Could be worse, right?" Whatever, Daniel thought. He walked to the charity shop and bought a few small ornaments, a clay plant pot and some kitchen knives. He put them in his bag and took the long walk round the neighborhood until sunset. When he got back to the house, he went up to his new room, changed into comfy clothes, and unpacked his rucksack. He went down a while later. Laythe was smoking a joint in the conservatory. "What are you doing? We'll lose the deposit if the house smells like smoke," Daniel shouted. "Relax. The smell of weed isn't like tobacco. It doesn't linger." Daniel noticed his heart pounding. He had a lot of his own money tied up in that deposit. "At least open a window." He walked to the conservatory window and opened it, as wide as it would go. "Aren't you afraid the neighbors might smell it?" Laythe laughed and held out the joint. "Come on, we've just moved in. Let's smoke some weed and just relax." He shook off the anxiety, took a pull on the joint, and sat down on the ginger throne. As the drug started to take effect, he let himself enjoy the success that had been the return to York. All the tribulations and all that money spent. Finally, a plan that's worked out perfectly. Laythe started up a philosophical discussion. "What would you do if you were the President of the United States and you had knowledge of a terrorist group that was torturing your citizens in some jungle somewhere?" "I would do everything I could to get them out," Daniel said after thinking for a moment. "And would you have the terrorists killed?" "Not if I could avoid it." "Why?" "Because life is sacred. Even if it's someone who's evil. I mean, what does evil even mean? Think about who that terrorist is, where they come from, what their childhood was like, how much they've suffered. Yes, this gives them no excuse to inflict suffering on others, but I can't look at them and say, you are evil and deserve to die." "What would you do?" he asked, noticing that Laythe's brow was furrowed. "I'd have the bastards killed." Laythe barked with far more enthusiasm than Daniel was ready for. Why? Laythe thought for a moment, then leaned forward. So they don't hurt any more innocents. You can do that by locking them up in jail. Yes, Laythe sat back and reclined his arm on the back of the sofa, but that wouldn't be retribution. And what does retribution bring you? Daniel had always appreciated his own inquisitive mind. It helped him get to the bottom of issues, to challenge his own thinking. What do you mean? Laythe smiled. What benefit does getting retribution bring other than making you feel like they got what they deserved? What else is needed? How about the fact that it doesn't undo any of the damage they caused? It doesn't affect their motivation to cause damage in the future. It simply makes the victims, their families, and sympathizers feel some sense of getting their own back. I'd argue that that feeling is not a nice feeling to want to have. That being glad of any human suffering is immoral. I would much rather take a practical approach to stopping them from harming further, than just try and help them to stop behaving so badly. Help them? What, by cuddling them and telling them that everything will be all right if they just come to Jesus and repent of all their sins? No, by treating them like they're someone who's mentally ill. Give them a therapist, maybe some SSRIs. But treat them like a human being who's in pain and needs help. Look, I understand what you're saying, matey, but retribution is important. People who do bad things must be punished. It's the nature of things. Trust me, evil people are evil. Daniel took a drag on the joint and thought about that. He'd been raised a Christian, but promptly cast off all association with the faith when he'd arrived at university on a science degree program. He didn't believe anymore in gods or spirits, afterlives or magical crystals. He was a scientist. Nevertheless, the morality taught to him in church seemed to linger on, forgiveness being the ultimate virtue, that all can be saved from their misdeeds. Of course, other moral lessons from the Bible had been ignored wholeheartedly, like restrictions on sexual activity, drug use, and encouraging the stoning of a woman to death if she's raped. He was sure someone said that in there, but of course he'd never read the thing. Some time passed. Laythe was now talking about something else, but Daniel wasn't listening. What would I do in that situation? Would I pull the trigger on an unarmed man because he had tortured an innocent? When he realized how long he'd been thinking to himself, he looked up. Laythe was sitting silently. He held a sharp knife, staring at the blade. Daniel's eyes narrow as he sees the intensity in Laythe's face. He looks angry, tortured even. Why does he have that knife all of a sudden? A wave of fear courses through Daniel's veins. His heart starts pounding. He looks at his friend and realizes, I don't really know who this man is. I know the stories he's told me, but is there any proof that he is who he says he is? What if it was all lies? Where'd he get that knife from? Has he had it this whole time? Why do I feel so afraid? He remembers that he's high, tells himself it's just weed paranoia. But the longer he tries to tell himself that, the more he can't stop looking at the sinister man in front of him, holding that knife. Panic creeps in. What are you doing? Daniel asks. Without looking up, Laythe freezes in place. A micro-expression flashes across his face, a twitch in his upper lip, expressing contempt. Contempt? Laythe tightens his grip on the knife. Trying to right a wrong. Thank you for joining me for Chapter 2 of my novel, Time Not Here. Hope you enjoy it. Chapter 3 will be coming very soon. The book is on Amazon if you'd like to take a look. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop me a comment below. Let me know if you followed along and whether this story is in any small way gripping you as much as it gripped me to write it. Alright, love you loads. Peace. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. See you again soon. Bye-bye.